All right. Today I'm going to talk about the current infrastructure automation landscape. This is going to be an overview for those that are maybe new to the infrastructure automation world, or maybe just familiar with one particular tool and want to expand their toolbox and understand when and where to use these different tools. So if this seems a little bit too basic for you, hopefully you come away with something, learn something new. Um, if not, I'm still glad you're here. I am Jake Robinson. You might know me previously as the product manager for VMware's CLIs and SDKs, including PowerCLI, VMware's top automation toolkit. We've done a ton with PowerCLI in the last 4 years, and I'm extremely proud to have led the team's first open source project, the vSphere DSC resources. I've been doing this for a while now. Started off as an infrastructure admin, and then started working for a cloud company doing infrastructure automation. Including work with VMware Cloud Director. And then finally, for the last 7 years, I've been working on some really cool automation tools at VMware. I've been a vExpert for a number of those years, again, focusing on PowerCLI and VMware Cloud Director. You can find me on Twitter, GitHub, or the VMware Code Slack at Jake Robinson. Feel free to reach out, and if you have a topic that you want to discuss around automation or these different tools, I'd love to talk to you about it. So I like starting my talks with this because for me it's motivating. It's a reminder that we should be continually learning in our field. We should be staying ahead of the curve on the different tools and trends that can make your organization more successful. So essentially, systems administrators working from a position of mastery of the command line on any platform generally outperform their counterparts, leading to a more career opportunities, more challenging roles, and higher incomes. So, for me, my motivation has always been making a difference, making other people's jobs easier. And through that, higher income has always been there, right? But, some I understand, some that the strive to, make it up the ladder is also important. So however way you look at it, again, as administrators, we need to constantly be staying ahead of the curve, especially sort of in this world of cloud and APIs. The world of infrastructure automation is a really broad topic, and I get to try and distill this into about a 20-minute talk. So I'm going to set the scope a little bit here, if that's all right. When we talk about infrastructure, I'm talking mainly today about VMware infrastructure, although some of this will apply to maybe some of your cloud infrastructure or any other platform that you run on. And when I talk about automation, I'm going to focus on tools in particular, which is where we get the most value as practitioners. Tools abstract SDKs, which abstract APIs, and it gives us the most value for our time. So, maybe if this was like a 4-hour talk, I'd dive in depth into VMware's various SDKs and language bindings and APIs and stuff like that. But for today, since it's a 20-minute talk, we're going to be focusing on a handful of tools that are really popular right now and give you the most bang for the buck. Now, infrastructure is another word that gets tossed around a lot, and it means different things to different people. The word infrastructure depends really on how high up the stack you live. If you're a VMware admin, you might say that the VMware and the VMs and the firewall rules and logging and monitoring. That's all application stuff. But as an application developer, that all looks like infrastructure to you. That's not part of your application, it's infrastructure. For our purposes, we're going to consider all of it infrastructure, but there are definitely strengths and weaknesses in the different tools that we use to manage these different types of infrastructure. So my number one reason for wanting to do this sort of general sort of State of the Union talk today is really this question. What tool do I use to automate my VMware infrastructure? I mean, it's a big question, and it depends on a lot of context, like what do you think infrastructure is, and what are you trying to do? A similar question that I get is, should I use tool X or tool Y to automate my VMware environment? Should I use PowerCLI or Ansible? They're essentially asking, where should I invest my time and my effort in learning to automate my VMware environment? Again, we need to dig in to see what the real challenges are before we can answer that. So I basically have two rules when I'm learning a new tool. The first one is use the best tool for the task. I didn't say use the right tool, because the right tool is the one that just gets it done. Use the best tool because you're going to save yourself from having to maintain a whole lot of bad practice and anti-patterns and stuff, basically junk down the road. I've learned the hard way that sort of your bad code like lives forever. That's the stuff that you can just never get rid of because it continues to work and you really hate it. But I'm starting to rant, so we'll move on to the second rule. The second rule is that no single tool is always the best tool. Just because you can do basically everything with PowerCLI doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And we'll get into some of the reasons why here when we talk about these specific tools. Talking a little bit about some vocabulary, some terms that are, essentially buzzwords a lot. If you're playing buzzword bingo right now, you'll probably get bingo here pretty quick. But infrastructure as code is becoming quite the buzzword lately. It essentially means describing our infrastructure in a format that we can use to actually build it. So like runnable code to actually make it happen. And this could be either declarative or imperative. Declarative says my infrastructure should be in this state and depends on these different things. Imperative or procedural code said this is the play-by-play procedure for configuring my infrastructure. So an example might be, let's say, deploying a virtual machine. So if I was to use PowerCLI to deploy a virtual machine, I would say create the virtual machine from this template with these different parameters, and then I would say power on the virtual machine. Okay, so that's a fairly short procedure. It's two different things. The declarative way to say that would just be to say there should be this virtual machine with these parameters and it should be powered on. That's how we declare that. So the difference there is with imperative, I'm writing down the entire procedure in the way I do something. Declarative says this is the state that I want this particular thing in. Another big one that is becoming more and more popular is immutable infrastructure. So immutable infrastructure is the idea that we get into these situations to where it's very hard to go from complex state A to complex state B. And it's just easier to destroy everything and rebuild it from with a known happy path procedure. So that's the whole idea around immutable infrastructure. Obviously, this doesn't work with persistent data. So if you have databases or any sort of persistent state or data that you want to keep, immutable infrastructure is not really for you. But we see a lot of immutable infrastructure with containers or ephemeral AWS instances. I like to use the analogy of buying a car when I talk about immutable infrastructure. So car manufacturers have different model years. Each year they make some amount of changes or fixes or upgrades to the cars. So generally, I say generally, because you can always swap out parts in your car and stuff like that. Generally, cars are immutable. So if you want all the features of a 2021 Tesla, you can't just buy all the 2021 parts and slap them onto your 2020 Tesla and call it a 2021. It's basically like a 2020 with a voided warranty, right? If you try and take that in and get service, they're going to say, like, you have all these parts swapped out. We don't have procedures for all this stuff. So that's essentially what it means, in sort of this immutable environment. Instead of, swapping out all these different parts inside of a virtual machine or inside your infrastructure, you just say, you know what, the state change between these things is just too hard. Let's just destroy it and build it from scratch. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and see if there are any questions. Open up chat here. First question is, what would you suggest infrastructure as code for general infrastructure and immutable infrastructure for something like temporary web servers? That's a great question. We're going to get into that in just a second here. Thank you for the question, Dan. Any other questions right now? Okay, we'll push forward.
We have Brian raised his hand. So Brian, feel free to talk. I just allowed you to talk, so you can go.
Oh, wow. Can you hear me?
Hey, yes. Brian.
Okay, cool. Hey, so we are actually, this is just a curiosity question to see how crazy I might be. Our ESXi hosts are immutable. We treat our ESXi hosts as cattle.
Okay.
And I just trying to see if the community, if anybody else in the community is actually doing that.
Yeah, so I will say, first of all, it's a fair, I won't call it rare, but it's a less common thing to actually see ESXi hosts treated as cattle, because it's a more of a, it's a long process to, boot up an ESXi host, let alone, either install ESXi on it, and do all that stuff. Are you installing ESXi? Are you like booting from like TFTP, or how are you actually accomplishing that today?
Well, we're leveraging HPE with their image streamer, which is essentially a boot from LUN capability where you copy over essentially the ghost. You have a ghost or a gold image that all of the ESXi hosts you boot from, and then it gets customized through Redfish.
Okay.
And we're using that with Ansible to do full and complete ESXi builds, and then also, getting into vCenter, full configuration for prod. And we're doing this for agility and scalability. So rather than, we got this host that's a snowflake in cluster X, and now we got to reprovision it to cluster Y, so now we got to rezone it and all that other stuff. No, we can just pull it right out and push it right into another cluster.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I was just
that's
wondering if anybody else was doing that or if that's a crazy idea. It's working, but
no,
I was just
it's
wondering.
yeah, it's really awesome. So I'll say traditionally, companies have done that with auto deploy. So VMware auto deploy essentially allows you to have a profile, and when that host boots
Yeah.
up, it boots from network and does it that way. There are limitations to that. The next thing, sort of the newer thing that I've seen, and VMware is actually putting a lot of effort into this right now, is Terraform. So using Terraform to build, I mean, Terraform really excels at immutable infrastructure, and I'm sort of getting my head ahead of myself there.
Right.
But Terraform is really strong with immutable infrastructure. So I think like sort of the HashiCorp workflow of doing something with a combination of like Packer and Terraform might be another way to go for you.
Yeah. All right. Just curious.
Yeah, cool.
And Jake, yeah, I don't know if you want to keep going because I know that we're about halfway through here. There was one more. It's actually another Brian raising his hand. I don't know if you want to take his question now or.
Sure.
All right. Brian
Brian Wilkner.
Wookner.
Hello, Brian Wilkner.
I must have accidentally raised my hand. I didn't have a question.
Okay.
You just wanted to let me know you were here, right, buddy?
Something like that. Thanks, Jake.
Good to see you, man.
All right, cool.
All right, moving on. All right, so let me go back here. So now we have all that out of the way. We're going to start talking about sort of the most popular tools that are available right now for VMware infrastructure automation. The first one, ta-da, PowerCLI. PowerShell and PowerCLI. PowerCLI, if you don't know, is VMware's library of PowerShell modules. We have a ton of different modules that work with all different products within VMware. We have over, I think, 650 commandlets at the last time I checked. And even if we don't have commandlets for something, you can always go straight through to sort of the underlying SDK to make those things happen with .NET. It can basically do anything. It's one of my favorite tools to use because you can do a lot with very few lines of code. It is 100% imperative procedural code by itself. So again, if I were to write some code to say deploy a virtual machine, I would be writing a step-by-step procedure to deploy that virtual machine. Its strengths really come in with reporting, with data manipulation. PowerShell, like I hate dealing with XML, especially in Ruby. It's probably the worst time of writing code I've ever had in my entire life. But like PowerShell just makes manipulating XML data, JSON data, whatever, like super easy. It treats everything as an object. And PowerShell is really strong at ad hoc changes at scale. So if I wanted to, do something across all my ESXi hosts or across all my virtual machines or get some information or stuff, anything like that at scale, PowerShell, PowerCLI is the way to do it. Weaknesses as far as PowerCLI goes is that imperative code can be brittle. So that script, that 1,000-line script that you had working a month ago, there's a chance that you try and run that again for whatever reason, and it just won't work. Not necessarily because VMware's fault, but certainly you need to be aware that there could be breaking changes at some point with either PowerShell, PowerCLI, or VMware's APIs. Okay. The next sort of tool in the toolbox here, and I'm lumping a couple of these together because they have very sort of similar mindsets. So you'll see that I've lumped some different tools together. Puppet and Chef excel at desired state configuration management. Puppet has a pattern around package file resource that is just really good for maintaining packages on virtual machines. At one point, we had some really good Puppet modules for managing vSphere and ESXi configuration, although those have largely been unmaintained. If you're unfamiliar with either of these tools, they both use a domain-specific language, both specific to their tools. So Puppet has the Puppet DSL, and then Chef has sort of a Ruby DSL that they use. They're both amazing at virtual machine configuration management, so managing the packages inside virtual machines, and auditability. So if you're an organization that really needs to have some way to audit changes within your organization, like Puppet and Chef have, I think, the best sort of platform for that. Weakness-wise, they both require agents. These are agents that will run on your virtual machines. If you were to use these agents for managing your VMware infrastructure, you would have to run that agent on some sort of proxy machine, because that agent will then talk to the vSphere APIs. But again, other than that, weakness-wise, I think the biggest weakness is, other than Dell really has a really, at least did have a really well-maintained Puppet module for vCenter, vSphere management. So I'd check that out. Still really good tools for virtual machine and workload management. Ansible and Saltstack, I sort of lump into this group of hybrid desired state configuration management tools. Both use YAML to describe the desired state. Both can run agentless. I say can because Saltstack does have the option for an agent as well. And both are a mix of sort of declarative and imperative. So you're sort of writing desired state in YAML, but you can also sort of get into this sort of imperative coding thing, to where you actually write sort of these workflows, more or less. The strengths for both Ansible and Salt are that they're very flexible. They're both written in Python. So if you know Python, you can write extensions, providers, modules for these things. You can use both of them for VM configuration management as well as VMware infrastructure management. We heard Brian talk about how he's using Ansible to do full ESXi host configuration, sort of immutable infrastructure. Weakness-wise, agentless does require SSH and Python and all of the Python libraries that you're sort of using for that to be running on that remote machine. So we can't do things like direct like ESXi configuration over SSH. You really don't want to be doing that anyway. You want to be going through the API for that stuff. That's one minor limitation. The other sort of, you can go back and forth on this, whether you love or hate YAML. YAML is definitely not a programming language. Describing stuff in YAML is, take it or leave it. So PowerShell DSC. Microsoft, looking at this whole paradigm of, the different desired states, whether we're going with imperative or declarative. DSC is Microsoft's answer to that declarative portion. So you can actually use DSC to write essentially declarative PowerCLI, PowerShell code. So one of the cool things that DSC does is it works with rather than competes against these other desired state tools. So you look at things like Puppet, Chef, Ansible, Salt, they all have DSC providers in them. So, the benefit to DSC and what we've done with the vSphere DSC resources is that we don't run into a situation where a tool falls out of favor, for doing infrastructure configuration, and then that module goes unmaintained. But still, people still use that tool. The benefit is DSC can be used by anything. It's sort of this primitive way of describing and running your implementation. So today you can fully describe vCenter and ESXi config with the vCenter, the vSphere DSC resources that we have open sourced. Positives, you can actually grab your current running config. So if you're in like a brownfield environment and you're not doing like 100% immutable infrastructure, you can grab your current config and actually create a template for an ESXi host using the DSC script that they have out there. Weakness-wise, .NET and PowerShell installation are required on anywhere that you want to run it. Again, using it for infrastructure configuration management, sort of the platform level, the vSphere level, you're going to have some sort of proxy since the DSC resources talk to the APIs. In terms of Windows, basically, Windows virtual machine configuration management, PowerShell is automatically installed there. It's fairly easy to get going there. And then Linux machines, I know they're still working on sort of Linux desired state configuration, but you will have to have .NET and PowerShell installed there as well. And then finally, Terraform. So Terraform is sort of this immutable infrastructure juggernaut right now. Everybody's talking about, Terraform. So it's good. It's really good, especially sort of in these, the cloud environments. I didn't hit my, buzzword quota for containers and Kubernetes yet, but essentially any of that immutable infrastructure up in the cloud to where it's very quick to destroy and bring up a new version of something, that's where Terraform really shines. It uses HCL to describe desired state. So if you're not familiar, or if you're not a fan of, learning a specific language for a specific product, I mean, I understand, but it really is a good tool. It's agentless, but it's best used when you're deploying stuff that's pre-baked. So either like a pre-baked container or a virtual machine template built with Packer. When we talk about sort of the workflow of going left to right in terms of development to production and sort of the whole CI/CD flow, developers essentially will build some sort of container with their application installed on it, ready to go, and then Terraform handles the rest of it. Everything from deploying the virtual machines or containers, to going out and talking to the APIs to add firewall rules and permissions and all that other stuff that we saw in that infrastructure chart. Weakness-wise, I would say, while Terraform is really good at immutable stuff, I don't feel that it's the right tool for the job when it comes to mutable stuff. So if you're doing VMware infrastructure and not doing what Brian's doing in terms of 100% immutable bare metal all the way up, it's not necessarily the right tool for the job. So just doing a little time check here. All right, we're gonna end this here. So where does that leave us? For managing VMware infrastructure, PowerCLI with a combination of DSC and really any configuration manager, Ansible, Salt, Puppet, Chef will cover everything that you need to do. For immutable workload infrastructure, everything from VMs, firewall rules, load balancing, stuff like that, especially in the cloud. So if you're running on VMware Cloud on AWS, like Terraform's the way to go. For persistent workload configuration management, I would say, pick a configuration manager that you like best. So check them all out and see what you like. Obviously, VMware is in the process of putting an offer on Saltstack, so we'll put that little plug in there. So, whole point of this is don't limit yourself to using only one tool for all your infrastructure management. I want to challenge you all to go out and try some new tools and essentially pick the best tool for the job. So I know we're pretty much out of time, but I'll open it up to any questions.
Did you get to the Jake? Did you get to the one that was in Q&A from? It's anonymous, but many of the ISC modules are community supported. VMware contributes, but does not officially support them. Do you see a risk in putting a lot of effort behind using them? And is VMware considering supporting more of those to reduce that risk?
I'm trying to find that question. Oh yeah. Would you suggest infrastructure as code for general infrastructure and immutable infrastructure, or something temporary like web servers? Yeah. So web servers. Oh, was it?
Sorry, it was a different question. It's in the Q&A, not the chat. Here, wait. I'll just.
I got it. Okay. I got it. I got it up here.
All right.
Yeah. So that's a good question. So I will say that VMware is in fact changing its stance on a lot of these things. Obviously, VMware's supported PowerCLI for many years, and we put a lot of investment into building a team around writing these PowerShell modules. And I'll say that we're doing the same thing for Terraform as well. So if you look at what VMware is doing, partnering with Terraform, we are making a significant investment in Terraform. So, in terms of the other tools, obviously investment in Saltstack. We have a number of official Ansible providers. So there are some official ones out there. Whether or not they're quote unquote paid support, like that's one thing. It's still community support. So I think we have some work to do in terms of adding support for these different tools, but know that we are investing a lot in these different areas. Going through different stuff in chat here, I'll try and get to one more. Justin Sider says, is YAML worse than XML? No. Let's see. As someone who has only used Ansible, what has Saltstack that Ansible? I think that's what does Saltstack have that Ansible doesn't? That's a good question. The one thing that I'll say in sort of my research on Saltstack is that it seems to do a lot more things sort of in parallel. You can do a lot more things in parallel versus Ansible. You can sort of do some parallel stuff sort of based on host, but last I checked, that was fairly limited. VMware recently buying Saltstack. Well, we haven't bought it yet, but I see what you're saying here. What's the future with VMware and Saltstack? I haven't seen the roadmap yet, so we'll have to see. Stay tuned. Brent, does support in this case mean GSS support? How do you get support when using a VMware module, plugin, etc.? So in the case of PowerCLI, there is basic support. They do have a SKU for sort of this SDK and programming support, but it doesn't include today. It does not include any of the infrastructure as code tools that we talked about today. Again, I think that with VMware maturing and putting more investment into things like Terraform, I think we're going to see a lot more of like GSS support coming soon.
All right.
All right,
I've got to jump to another session.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and end it here. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Again, hop on the VMware Code Slack channel if you want to ask me more questions. If you have comments, improvements on the information that I gave here, please don't hesitate to come and chat. Thank you again, all, for coming, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Jake.